Welcome to the Actor's Voice conversations on singing and acting with John and Russ. A little bit about what we do here. The Actor's Voice conversations are informal conversations with industry professionals who deal directly with the training, cultivation, and use of the voice for singers and actors. John and I will be speaking with voice teachers, coaches, musical directors, actors, opera singers, stage directors, voice scientists, and other performing arts professionals to help demystify the world of voice training and shed light on the multitude of ways industry professionals deal with the actor's voice. The series is designed to reach students and educators, as well as rising and established professionals, and to help bridge the gap from the classroom and the professional industry. Through conversations with leading professionals, we'll explore the nuances of voice training, the expectations of voice professionals in a multitude of performing arts industries, and the nature of working in these fields. Um, so throughout the series, we're going to be talking to a lot of different people, but we thought that a nice way to start would be to talk to each other. So our first question for any guest is to tell us about your journey and how did you get started in music, performance, theater, etc. So I'm going to pitch that question straight to John first.
Making me go first. All right. Um, how did I get started? It's a good question that I'm always reevaluating. How did I get started? I guess I can kind of go back to high school where I started singing and did the choir thing for a while and really enjoyed that experience. I enjoyed making music. I enjoyed having an outlet. Didn't really know what to do with it beyond that. I did 3 years of the musicals in high school. And so when it came time for college, didn't really know what else to do with life. So, hey, I'll be a music major and thought initially, I did a couple of musicals in high school and I was the lead, 2 or 3 times. So that must mean I'm pretty good. So I'm going to go and do musical theater. Problem is I can't act and I can't dance and I'm a giant. So found out very, very quickly that
Six,
was
five, am I right?
six. Yeah. So MT was not going to be the world for me. Went to Calvin College for my undergraduate in music and vocal performance, and didn't really know what I wanted to do. Besides, I'm pursuing music and discovered opera there. Mark Moliterno, who we're going to be talking to at some point, was my first voice teacher there. Introduced me to opera and thought, hey, you're a giant and there's a voice there, so maybe opera might be a good place for you. So we pursued that for a while. Kind of kept waiting for somebody to say no or to say you should change your direction. Did a couple of competitions in college, did the Nats thing and did fairly well, placed a couple of times and won the concerto competition at college. So I'm like, all right, I guess I must be okay with this. So I should go on and do some grad work. Didn't know how to research that. Had a new voice teacher my senior year, and we were still establishing a relationship, and I didn't know how to ask questions of what should I be looking for. So this is kind of it wasn't pre-internet days, but it was early internet days. So going to a school's website and finding out, hey, what do you do, still wasn't really a thing. This was 1999, 2000. So I didn't even know how to find information. So I had a couple of schools that were on the radar and did a couple in Ohio, including Bowling Green. And it just so happened that they liked me and actually offered me a role in their summer program on the spot. And I didn't understand what they were saying at the time. Like I had just been introduced to Hugo Wolf, and they had asked me if I wanted to sing a Wolf role. I'm like, are you mispronouncing Wolf? What's going on? So we had kind of a fun little moment there. They offered me some money and assistantship, so I thought, hey, I'll go there. It's better to not pay for school if you don't have to. That was the best offer that I had. So I went to Bowling Green, and that's where we hooked up and met and did a Marriage of Figaro together. It was our first show, which, oh, we can talk about that later. That was an experience. It really was an experience. Um, and kept singing there and discovered through my assistantship that I really like to teach. And so thought I need to get the doctorate. So went straight from Bowling Green to the University of Minnesota for the doctorate. Had the 3-year plan, so I was going to get that DMA really quick and be teaching right away. And life gets in the way, and so 2 years in, I got an offer to take a full-time teaching gig as an interim instructor, and so I took that. Did a pause, and by that point, I was performing somewhat regularly. And then I hooked up with the Rose Ensemble. It's an early music vocal group, and started touring all over the place, and really got into early music, and then had to try and finish the doctorate while I was touring and while I was teaching. I was an adjunct at a couple of schools at that time as well. So that was kind of crazy. And man, after that, finally finished the doctorate. 7 years later, I think is what it took. Got my first tenure track position. Lasted a couple of years there. Took a 1 year position to get out of the deep south, and then the opportunity to come to Lansing Community College 3 years ago popped up, and hey, I could come home and I could make a living and I could still teach and I could still gig, and that brings us here. So
Excellent.
that's my story, and I'm sticking to it.
Sounds very good. Very, very well put. Interesting. My whole path to singing was very winding and unexpected. I went through, most people you talk to, and they talk about singing when they were kids or singing in school. And my situation was interesting because I didn't. I never sang a note, actually. I remember in elementary school auditioning for an elementary school choir, and my voice changed early. So in fifth grade, the voice I have now was the voice I had then. Effectively, I'm now I'm a high tenor, but in fifth grade I was some kind of alien being. And so I had a music teacher at the time who just said, why don't we wait a couple of years, wait till everybody catches up. And for me, I just assumed that meant I wasn't a singer. I went and I played my saxophone, and I never sang again until I was going into high school. And I had some music teachers at that time who were just influential as could be and one of the things they said to me was, why don't you join the choir, because otherwise you'll end up in the remedial music classes and you don't belong there. So that was kind of how they structured things. And I started singing. That year I started taking voice lessons with my first teacher, and then I was off and running through high school, and I had some wonderful teachers. Did the whole show choir circuit, singing and dancing with show choirs for years. And by the time I got to college, there was no question in my mind. It was what I was going to do. So I went music ed because I had all these really influential music teachers. I did my 4 years at Heidelberg, sang with their, opera theater stuff. I did some of my first roles at that time with some local groups like the Finley Light Opera Company. And it was all MT, but I was studying, classical music as a musician. And it never occurred to me that I was anything other than something I did on the side. I was just working toward my music ed degree. I did my 4 years at Heidelberg, lots of choral singing. Got to the end of my time at Heidelberg when all of my friends were taking the praxis and getting ready to go out and teach. And I said, I don't want to. And we're talking like the end. I had already done my senior recital. It was probably, a month before graduation. And I just decided I didn't want to go out and teach in public schools like I thought I was going to. So I applied last minute to Bowling Green State University because there's a tenor there I was interested in studying with, and my teacher was thought he was going to have a heart attack because I had not prepped a graduate audition, I had not prepared in any way. I thought he was going to kill me, but he encouraged me nonetheless. I auditioned at Bowling Green. Got in on their assistantship as well. I think I was like a year ahead of you, John, if I'm right. And then I hooked up with some great people at Bowling Green. Wonderful voice studio, did the opera stuff, continued to sing and do lots of like art song and opera as it came up. But I had put MT aside. A lot of times, I don't know, classical singers. I think musical theater is something that you do for fun, but no one ever looks at it as this serious possibility in the music world. And I always felt a little bit ashamed that I had so much interest in it. But whenever I got a chance to work with theaters, it was really the thing that I was drawn to. When I left Bowling Green, I went to Baltimore. I got married, and my wife and I moved to Baltimore, where I taught public school for a while, and I adjuncted at the Community College of Baltimore County. And it was there that I really started working with actors because we had a pretty good theater program, and the actors started to gravitate my way, and I started to work with lots of actors for the stage, doing lots and lots of musical theater voice and more contemporary styles. And before I knew it, I had a studio full of actors, and I didn't really know how it happened. But I was doing less and less classical music at that time, more and more musical theater. Uh, I continued to adjunct at CCVC. I picked up a full-time job in Baltimore as a choral director, and I did that for 7 years. Did all their shows, conducting the pit orchestras and working with the singers and working at the choirs. And I always had one foot in, the choral singing and and the other foot in musical theater. I worked for a lot of the theaters in Baltimore. And right about the time my son was born, I think I had started MDing, and I was doing two shows at once, and I realized how crazy it had gotten and how I was dividing my time was not sustainable,
Yeah.
um, because I would teach at one school in northwest Baltimore County in the morning. Then I would drive down to southwest Baltimore County and teach at a college in the afternoon. And then I would circle back around to northeast Baltimore County and work at the theaters at night. And 15 hours later, I would pull back into my house. And so I started to look around and look for things outside of the public schools. And that's when I found RCVC needed a person to head their music program. And it took me back into college full time, where I'm teaching singers and singing a bunch in Philadelphia now, not so much Baltimore. So lots and lots of theater, a fair amount of early music, lots of concert work. And we're both teaching at community colleges.
We are. Never would have guessed that. And there's
I know.
so much truth in your journey here, from the classically trained musician who has shame about the non-classical world, which is sadly still a thing, even though it's absolutely a necessity for any singer these days, to the plight of the adjunct and the underemployed, working 15, 18-hour days sometimes. I remember the same thing. It was 100-hour weeks for how many years? It's a crazy life that we lead, and yet we wouldn't have it any other way. I wouldn't have it any other way. I don't know about you.
No, and I think that's because there's so many facets to what we do. If any one of those kind of bullet points isn't met, we seek more work. We want to be performing. We want to be teaching. We want to be working with the people that we enjoy the most. And so, if you weren't singing early music and teaching at the college and doing whatever else, you would feel something was missing.
Oh, absolutely.
That's where I was. I mean, I was directing choirs during the day, and I was teaching, voice students in the afternoons at the college. But I still wanted to be in the theaters, and so that's what my nights were for.
Right. That's awesome.
I love it.
Who needs family time? You got the theater.
I mean, that definitely changed my life and my priorities. So that's part of it.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. So that's neat. When we talk about what drew you to the field, that's a question we often ask. You said that you couldn't imagine doing anything else. Was there a moment? Was there a time when you just said, "This is it"?
I don't think there ever was that one magical moment. I truly believe that if somebody had told me to stop, I would have stopped and found something else to do. I was waiting for someone to say, "You're not good enough. Stop doing this," because I was aimless. I had no idea what I wanted to do with my life, and music was something that I was comfortable with, and the competitor in me, I was good enough. I was, now male voices, so the competition is much lower. But but I was always one of the best singers wherever I was, and I was comfortable with that, and that fed the ego, and it was something that I could hold my hat on and say I'm good at this. So I kept pursuing it. Now it got much harder once the professional world opened up, and you go, okay, I'm competing against world-class singers, and they're awesome. I'm no longer one of the best of the best, but I could still hold my own, and I could build a career out of it. But what really drew me to it, I've been analyzing that question for a really long time. And actually, we may link a video that I did a couple years ago, a talk that somewhat dealt with that. I don't I don't have a clear this is what was going on, but I do imagine it had something to do with that was my way of processing life. That was my way of accessing emotions that I otherwise wasn't capable of dealing with. It was my way of managing and controlling my ADHD. Um, and it was something that helped me through all of that. And still helps me through all of that. You know, that there's a huge difference between days where I get to sing for 20 minutes and days that I go, nope, today was a paperwork day. Shoot. I'm a different person. And I think that's really what it was. But it wasn't like I listen to music and I go, I have to sing. Or, you know, there are some people who have been divas and devos since they were 5 years old, and they've been singing arias since before they could talk. And, you know, that was never me. And especially as a youth, you know, my parents loved to tell the story of when I was in the, you know, the children's choir at church, not only refusing to sing, but refusing to do any of the gestures that were, you know, along with it, you know, clap your hands and point to God or whatever. And I refused to and glared at the director the entire time. The fact that I've become a singer is still kind of a novelty in my family, because that was not me. I didn't sing in the home. I didn't make music. It wasn't, you know, a particularly musical home, though both my parents have wonderful voices and did sing. But I'm still looking for what was that thing that really got me there. And the only thing that I can come up with, it was a way of processing things that I otherwise couldn't deal with. So it was my way of interacting like a real human being. And it brought me out of my shell, and it brought me into a place that I could work with other people and could communicate with other people on a level that I wasn't otherwise capable of.
Yeah, that's interesting. That's, you know, so it was a kind of a slow fade, right?
It really
You
was.
said, this is just what I do now. Yeah.
Yeah. It was always the most comfortable thing.
Yeah.
That's as big a point as I could put on it. It was the most comfortable thing for me to be doing. Even through college, where you start questioning yourself and going, why do I suck so badly? As we all go through, you know, it's tantamount to torture sometimes. And yet it was still
Wow.
the most comfortable thing.
Amazing.
Yeah.
Amazing. The yeah, I often wonder if I have one kind of pivotal point. And if I came back to anywhere, it would be like my eighth grade year, where I met those music teachers who suggested I try singing. I was a saxophone player from fifth grade, but it was never really my thing. It was just something I did. I was
Mm-hmm.
okay at it. I set my claim, mostly because I was big enough to play the Barry sax before anybody else could. Um, but I wasn't, you know, I wasn't a fantastic saxophone player.
Mm-hmm.
Um, to this day, the only time I pull my horn out is if I play with our college community band. But singing, despite having never done it, when in eighth grade, when these, these middle school music teachers, Nick Vangeloff and Kevin Manley, kind of pointed me towards the choir. Um, that was a new thing. And at the end of my eighth grade year, I sang my first role in our, you know, abridged production of The Secret Garden, the
Mm-hmm.
middle school kind of watered down choral version of it.
Right.
And and I don't think I looked back. You know, from going into high school, I just knew the music department was where I belonged. I played sports, but it was always kind of a second tier thing for me.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I never, by my senior year, I stopped playing football because I didn't have enough time for all the music stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And I was lucky enough to have people support me through it. Like you said, I was kind of just waiting for the other shoe to drop. Like, when am I gonna hit the wall and not be good enough to do this anymore?
Mm-hmm.
Didn't happen. So I guess I'm still waiting to a certain extent.
Boy.
You know, it got harder. I think that's a really important thing. You go from being kind of top of the heap, whether you know, and just one of the better singers in the room, you know, all in school and things like that, and then you know, you get out in the world and you realize that all those best singers in the room are gathered in one place.
Mm-hmm.
And it's the professional world. It's the top end of the conservatories and going into professional life. And
I'll tell you, the biggest slap in the face of realization of what am I really doing with my life was when I lost a gig to my voice teacher and went, okay, that's where we are right now.
yeah, uh, I never felt quite so aware of where my skills deficits were as when I was standing on stage at BGSU
Mm-hmm.
doing Die Fledermaus opposite my voice teacher
Yeah.
with Eisenstein. Uh, and to hear him sing it and to watch him act it. And I suddenly said, wow, I've got some work to do. But like on one hand, you're like, I'm in my master's degree, I'm an assistantship, I'm getting somewhere in this field, and then you're like,
Hmm.
wow, I'm not anywhere near where I need to be yet.
Hmm. And sadly, that realization never goes away.
Yeah.
You know, the no matter how far you go, no matter how much you train, no matter how much you sing, you always feel like the summit is not even in sight. You know, it's the constant struggle to improve, and that's one of the things that I love about teaching is helping people to understand that that's not a terrifying thing. It doesn't have to be. But it's the journey that's important. It's the struggle. It's the daily grind to get better and to enjoy that process. That's what's really necessary. If we start feeling like I need to reach a certain level and then I'll be good, that's never going to happen.
Right. And if it ever does, that's indicative of a problem.
Hmm.
Because if you're going to stop growing, then you're going to stagnate.
Yeah,
And so I think that's huge. And I think that's actually a narrative that we see as we, talk to people in this field. We'll realize that people just, they find their niche, but you have to keep
hmm,
growing in that niche.
yeah, absolutely. Now, I was taught very early on. So John Verino, who was he's out in Grand Rapids, works with the symphony out there, and he was at Calvin College for a brief period of time as well. Came and did a guest lecture for us when I was an undergrad. As I was my senior year, and he said, "These are the most important words you will ever need as a musician. Yes, I can do that." And then listed off the litany of things that he had done in his career. Was like, I had no business doing that, but I said, yes, I can do that, and then I learned how to do it. And that's how you grow and you build that skill set and you build that base. Have your niche, have your specialty. And in fact, especially in academia these days, you have to have that. Without it, you're not getting a job. But if you can't do a myriad of things, you're going to be lost, and it shows that you're not growing.
Yeah. And sometimes, saying yes, like you said, is terrifying because you've never done it or you didn't think you could ever do it. But it might be the very thing that leads you toward wherever that specialty is going to be.
Hmm.
For me, I know my first MD gigs as like in musical theater as a musical director came because somebody needed somebody to MD, and I said, sure, I'll do that, but I've never
Hmm.
done it before. I had the basic skills, but I was like, wow, I'm not enough of a pianist to pull this off. Wow, I have no idea what I'm doing. And then I had to delve in and learn a whole new skill set.
Hmm.
Um, but you come out the other end of that, and you realize that it's probably the decision to say yes is what sent you down that particular path. Open that door.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
That's cool. So, kind of going down our list here, I think we both found a niche in teaching. And so I'm going to go down and say, in your experience, was you're working with singers, the training of the voice, young and aspiring actors and singers. Um, what, how do you approach these students, and what do you see as like the things that you really need to work with them on the most?
Oh man, can I just do one or two? No, I can't.
Yes,
Uh,
please. Oh, yeah.
you know,
I'm
there's
being really open ended with our questions, mostly because I remember what they were. Find it.
no, I mean, everybody is unique, and everybody has a different special need. Which is one of the reasons why I love teaching is because it's problem solving, and it's a different problem every time you step into the room. That's what I love about it. I can say, however, that most students tend to have that anxiety about themselves as a performer. Am I good enough? Will the performance be met with positive or critical reaction? And they're always fearful of that critical reaction. So getting them to the place where, again, talking about is it about achieving the summit or just making our way towards it, that is the important process, and getting them to understand that mistakes are a part of the process, and failing is part of the process. And I still carry a book, Try, Fail, Fail Better, all on failure quotes, and what led to success later on. And I begin every semester in every class talking about failure and the need for failure in the learning process. Without it, we don't learn. It is the first step. Otherwise, you already know it, or you're not going to anyway. We have to have that failure moment to show us what we need to be working on, and what else we can try and how else we can try. So understanding and being accepting of failure as part of the growth mentality is number one. And along with that then is also how do we build up that psyche, which will then translate to energy when they're singing. You know, when people are fearful, when they are afraid of what sounds aren't going to be acceptable, afraid of how things will be responded to, you know, they are not able to achieve their true greatness. And I truly believe that every singer who steps in the door can achieve greatness. How much time it takes, how much energy it takes, that's a whole other set of questions. But it is possible for almost everybody. Beyond that, just basic understanding of the instrument and being able to pay attention, developing a kinesthetic sense winds up being one of the biggest challenges that I encounter with the students these days, depending on who we're talking about. So I can say with my current population, that's one of the biggest issues. At previous stops, that was not the biggest problem. But here, having students who are self-aware and can regulate and understand, if I do X, then Y, that's a big part of what we do. You know, even just basic understanding of head voice versus chest voice.
Yeah.
Oh, you get it. Cool. All right.
And you know, getting a singer to past that point of being you know, hypercritical of themselves, or hypercritical of the sounds that they might make, or judging those sounds before they're even, you know, phonated and made. A lot of that is getting these singers to be comfortable with their own voice and comfortable
Mm-hmm.
with their own personalities and their own beings.
Mm-hmm.
I know so often we have, you know, all these kind of layers to break through because students are pretty sure they know what the sound they're supposed to make sounds like, and so they're trying to back map how do I make a
Mm-hmm.
sound that mimics what I think I'm supposed to do,
Mm-hmm.
rather than finding an authentic voice of their own.
Yeah.
So just kind of getting them through that, um, through that period of self doubt, those all those layers of saying,
Mm-hmm.
no, you just we gotta find you in there somewhere. Like
Yeah.
this is an authentic sound for you.
Yeah.
Now, how do we use that
Yeah.
and let that grow?
Getting
That's
getting past the it doesn't sound like the recording mentality. Oh man.
it's wild, man. And I also loved what you had to say about you know, figuring out what failure looks like and experimenting with you know, all different things without a fear that it's going to completely flop. That's my kids.
Yep.
Uh, the growth mindset,
Yep.
right? We have to cultivate all of these things before we even get into the nitty gritty of vocal technique.
Mm-hmm.
Definitely, vocal technique is something that I know we're both interested in. You know, we're not getting too much in the weeds of pedagogy just yet. Uh, we are, you know, that's what we're primarily concerned with as teachers. But uh, gosh, you know, we have so much to do before we can get there.
And you know, even that, I can say my interest, because you know, there is a part of me that likes to pull things apart and figure out how does this work and why does it work, and I love doing that, and so I apply that to the voice, and that's why pedagogy, on the mechanical sense, and on the, you know, physiological, that fascinates me. How useful is that in the teaching studio? And that's the struggle, finding where does my passion for understanding translate into what is in the best interest of the student. This is where pedagogy, you know, where the rubber really meets the road, because we need the understanding of how it works. We absolutely do. But ultimately, what are we after? We're after an authentic performance. We're after a free and thrilling performance, something that is generated by emotion and intention. And there's no amount of mechanical understanding that drives that. So how do we merge the two? And for me, when I say pedagogy, then it's not just about the mechanical, though I love that. If I could just spend all day researching and reading and listening to, you know, the experts talk about it, because there are some brilliant minds out there, you know, that's what really feeds me. But the student won't be helped by that. So how do we use that to gear our own intentionality in speaking and in teaching to get the authentic performance out of our student?
And I think this is another example of why when we begin to talk about these, how we match up, because you're driven by the mechanical, by the technical, by how do I make it work, and my desire to understand that is out of a desire to speak truth through a performance, which I think is why I'm so drawn to actor singers,
Mm-hmm.
because how do we find your authentic voice and then speak your authentic truth through this music to see something that is going to be truly magical on stage.
Yeah, and if we
It-
want to talk about, so going back to kind of the previous question of what is the biggest difficulty or the challenge with students, it's allowing them or encouraging them or getting them to the place where they have something to say. And this is again the classical MT divide, and I see there's a huge difference between my classical singers and my MT singers. My MT singers almost always they're trying, whether it's the correct place for that character to go, whether it's a healthy place for them to be going, getting them to have an impulse is not usually the problem. Whereas my classical singers, man, there's nothing there. They don't want to engage on a personal level. This is somebody else's word. This is somebody else's music. This is something that's imposed on me from 200 years ago. And how do I find my authenticity through that? That's the number one challenge beyond anything else.
I think that speaks to the age-old problem of the divide between, and even looking at the divide between MT and opera, but how opera is changing. We're starting to see that to tell these stories authentically and to speak to a new generation, we have to find our truth in these old stories.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and there's real drama there. That's why when I first said I want to talk about the actor's voice, not just musical theater. Opera is part of that. Frankly, all song is story. All singing is performance and telling a story as an actor singer, and we lose sight of that sometimes when we get into the conservatory and we're so concerned about our technique and we become so removed from what we're
Mm-hmm.
saying that
Mm-hmm.
we're just thinking about making sounds,
Right.
Uh, that's amazing. That's amazing. But I know I was there for a long time. It took me a long time to figure out how to create that intentionality for myself. Um, and I had to be made uncomfortable to do it.
Mm-hmm. Truth.
Which means,
Truth.
again, developing that growth mindset. Because that moment that feels like failure ends up being a breakthrough to something else.
Absolutely.
Um,
Absolutely. And I'll tell you, when we talk about those turning point moments in life or career, and I can't say that there's one that pointed me towards music, but I can say in terms of getting uncomfortable, forcing you into a better place as an actor, there ain't nothing that moved me more than having to play Tarquinius in The Rape of Lucretia. Brutal. Brutal. Wildly uncomfortable. And I can't say how successful it was at that moment in there, but it brought me to another place that forced me into looking at what is driving and motivating sounds that are being made.
yeah, yeah. It's amazing. Whatever it is that forces you out of your comfort zone can end up being the best thing in the world for you. Uh,
Mm-hmm.
I will never claim to be a pianist by any stretch, but a key moment for me that made me realize that I wanted to work with actor singers was being a participating member of an acting class, an actor and a singer in the acting class, where I wasn't even necessarily there by choice. I had to take this acting class as part of a music degree, and I didn't even consider myself as an actor yet because I was just not there. Um, musical theater and roles were things I had done, but I always did them as a music person who was sort of playing in that,
Right.
never taking it seriously. And
Mm-hmm.
but the accompanists had an emergency and couldn't come, and I had to step in and do some coaching with some singers, and play a little bit at the piano, which terrified me, and just do coaching through these scenes instead of this coach. And it was not it absolutely terrified me, but it also, I had a moment there where I just said, wow, I really love this. I don't think I want to do anything else. um like I'll still sit down and look at a score and say, when is the real pianist coming? But
Yeah.
I still love it.
Yeah.
I get to work with singers. I get to coach, whether that's as a coach or as a teacher. That I never would have gotten there if I wasn't thrown there by mistake.
Yeah.
Yeah. Wow. So where are we here?
I don't even know.
We've done all kinds of things. No, it's all good. So I'm looking at the questions we normally ask our guest here. You've talked about that moment. Do you have favored methodologies or pedagogies?
Oh gosh.
And aspects of those that draw you? What kinds of things feature most prominently in your training of the actor's voice?
Oh man, that's a great question. The great question that we came up to ask other people that I don't want to think about myself.
Yes.
No,
Yeah.
I draw from a lot of different places, and I can say one area of interest that I would like to incorporate more that I don't unfortunately think will be as conducive to the environment in the next year is working with different acting methodologies and building with inspiration and working with a student on that. Because otherwise, my default really is on pedagogy, and let's talk about why that vowel choice doesn't work and this vowel choice might be better. Let's talk about how do we release the tension in the root of the tongue. Let's talk about posture and breathing. Dealing with students who have never had a voice lesson before. That's typically what's happening with our students at LCC. We've got to go back to the basics, so my default is to go back to the basics and the mechanical, and it's effective, but it can't be in isolation. And we have to come back to what is the driver, what is the motivator, and frequently finding that when we get that driver or motivator in place, some of the defective mechanics come along for the ride in an improved way. So that's where I would like to be. Otherwise, I can say one of the groundbreaking, I won't call it a methodology necessarily, but looking at, say, Ken Bozeman's books, and how do we treat the voice as listeners and the acoustic properties, and how does that explain what we hear? That was always one of my big frustrations because I did the jumping around. Am I a bass? Am I a tenor? Am I a baritone? Am I a bass baritone? What the heck am I supposed to be doing with my voice?
Literally.
Yeah,
Yeah.
literally. I think I'm one of the few people who can claim that I have been paid to sing every male role in the Magic Flute.
There you go.
Where's the voice supposed to be? But understand that there are predictable experiences, and knowing where those predictable experiences are, and why does this song or aria line up for me as a quote tenor when this one lines up for me as a quote baritone on the same day, and having to do with those acoustical principles and properties. That was mind blowing for me, and so there are elements of that leak into every single lesson. Yeah.
That's No, that's really interesting, and for those who are listening who aren't classical voice people, FACH, it has to do with the type of voice you are. I swear I'm not cursing on our series. Just made for a fun play on words. Um,
And I
but
think it's a book.
yes, I think it
Yeah.
probably. Right. So now I'm copyright infringement.
Right.
Um, uh, so methodologies and pedagogies, I find it all very fascinating. Obviously staying current in voice science and reading about voice science and pedagogy, reading and rereading books that we read throughout our training as singers. I find those really interesting. But a lot of times, what you're talking about in terms of how the acting pedagogy informs the singing and informs how we work through song, that's something that's really become interesting for me.
Hmm.
Not just dissecting a song for individual objectives and intentions, kind of Stanislavski style, digging down and um, finding those objectives and finding those motivators, but going out into others. I've been reading a book recently, which I think applies very well to a voice studio. It's How to Stop Acting. Harold Guskin. Are you
Hmm.
familiar with it?
Yeah.
And he talks about taking it off the page.
Yeah.
And I love that for voice too, because you can excerpt a phrase. You can excerpt something that's either technically challenging or maybe something that comes very easily. And you can excerpt and turn those things into voice freeing exercises to where you're trying to find an intention in a phrase.
Hmm.
Um, and for me, working with actors, I love um, to use the rep as an impetus for finding character.
Hmm.
Because so many actor singers, they're maybe actors when they're speaking, and then they go to sing, and it's just
Hmm.
blank slate, right?
Hmm.
But finding intention through song. And how does that, and of course we have to, trail that back. How does it inform your technique, and how are you finding, how are you using your voice to tell this story? But those moments of inspiration, those moments and dramatic beats that inform a character can be really freeing technically as well.
Mm.
And that's how I approach a lot of my work with both MT and classical singers. Classical singers just have to get past that divide of language sometimes, right?
Mm-hmm.
They're talking about the same thing, but you have to show them that.
Yeah,
You have to
yeah.
kind of lead them to it. Um, Other methodologies and pedagogies for me, I think I love the kind of classical vocal concept of chiaroscuro
Mm-hmm.
and colors, but I like to really broaden and expand that definition with my singers and talk about the range of possible colors of the human voice, and how that range is dynamically different for different styles and types of singing.
Mm-hmm.
I was saying the other day to a student that, in classical singing, we have a range of colors that we utilize, but all of that entire range of color has to be informed by the most efficient use of sound for unamplified singing. These are the sounds we use. These are the colors that we
Mm-hmm.
employ, knowing that we have to project our voices acoustically. And then how much different or what other parts of the voice can we explore if we know that we have a mic at our disposal?
Mm-hmm.
That color spectrum changes.
Mm-hmm.
You can sing pastels that would never be heard in an opera house.
Absolutely.
Um, and so
Absolutely.
I like to utilize organic imagery and try to tie it into the technical and scientific with my
Mm-hmm.
singers. And I love to focus on intention of the text and the
Mm-hmm.
words, because everything we do as actor singers in every discipline uh, is informed by the text, and that's huge for me.
And I would say, even beyond informed by the text, everything we do as singers is about expression. And finding out what we are expressing and why we are expressing is so necessary. There are moments, I'm thinking, I think it was in the second year that I was at BG, so I think you were off in Baltimore already. But we did the Passatieri one acts,
Yeah, I
and
missed that.
yeah, we had a great time. He's a wonderful man. We had a chance to do a master class with him. It was fantastic. But I was singing in The Women, which is a 12-tone, serially composed opera, where the first like 3 pages are a cappella on the word ah. There's no text to draw from. We can look later in the score and see what is going to happen to the characters, but what do we do for those 3 pages? We have to have a motivation. We have to have a driver of sorts. What is leading us to make this sound?
Yeah,
Whether it's a vocalese, song predates speech. We are trying to emote. We are trying to connect. We are trying to express. And without that, there's no point.
yeah. And are all 3 pages of that single intention, or are they different? Are they
Mm-hmm.
changed? Are they?
Mm-hmm.
They're all informed by a character. That's
Mm-hmm.
that's a great point. I like that expressiveness
Mm-hmm.
element. I think that's just really wonderful stuff. So yeah, I think what's hard about these, putting the fine detailed point on what pedagogies do we like. I think we employ lots of them,
Yeah.
they are different for different students, and they're different in the moment. But the commonality is that we're trying to get people to utilize their voice and to express with it,
Mm-hmm.
um, and how we can free people to tell their story and the character story
Mm-hmm.
with the instrument at their disposal. That's
Absolutely. Well, and it goes back to a previous part of the conversation we were having as well, with the never-ending quest for learning. You can find a pedagogy or a methodology or a system that works for you in this moment in time. Will it continue to work for you in 10 years? Will it work for every student? And of course, the answers are no. We have to continually add to our arsenal. I remember reading in one of Richard Miller's books, he talks about the danger of the toolbox teacher, who has, this tool will work. I'm like, but I'm sorry, with due respect to one of the greatest pedagogues of the 20th century, um, who am I to say no? But no, we have to have a variety of things to draw from, because not everything works for every person in every context. So let's diversify that palette as much as we can to pull from a wide variety of sources to get to that intentionality and that motivated place for an authentic experience for our singers.
That's yeah, that's all fascinating. It really is. I think that's a really the crux of what we do. And again, how do you describe that? It changes with time. That's really neat. Um, so that being said, there are commonalities that we found. A lot of times, what we ask people on our series is that do we see common deficits or weaknesses in our actor singers? Things that are there places in the training that we see gaps and we see holes. And I know for me the answer is yes. It's one of the reasons why I conceived of wanting to have these conversations.
Right.
But yeah, I mean, what do you see as common ones for us?
Oh man, musical literacy is a big issue in my current program. We have some people who come in and they come in from very strong choral programs and they can read, and sometimes just making the translation from I can read in the choral situation to I can read as an individual singer. There's sometimes a disconnect there, so we have to work with that, and that's with our accomplished singers, who are coming from good vocal programs in high school. For those who aren't coming from good vocal programs in high school, that musical literacy is even more of an issue. Sometimes they can have an incredible ear, but they don't necessarily know how to tie it together to learn specifically for them. So I hate to say that that's number one, because I'm not at all an advocate of we have to learn how to read music from the page and that's the only way to learn music, because it's not, and we have to get over that. But understanding relationships, seeing patterns, learning how to learn music, that is far and away the biggest gap that I see in my students today. Again, different story and in different situations. When I was working at private liberal arts colleges, that wasn't so much an issue. At the community college, level, that's huge.
Yeah, and I think getting across to students, because I see similar things. Why it's important. I think we've moved to a place where we've realized as music educators that some of the traditional literacy skills that were pushed for so long are not the sole way to learn music. However, there's something to be said for those traditional literacy skills, and students have to build that musicianship and musicality, even if they're, not the best sight reader in the entire world. They have to know how to work their way through a score.
Mm-hmm.
They have to know how to take the notes from the page, and through active listening, connect the dots
Mm-hmm.
to learn a piece,
Mm-hmm.
to then be able to, plunk parts on something they've never heard before. A little bit of functional keyboard skills. I think
Mm-hmm.
that's huge.
Mm-hmm.
If I could preach one thing across the board to whether it be classical, more classical music students or MT students, it's work on the fundamentals. Because in a classical musicians, we tend to ignore the fundamentals to move on to more advanced music theory,
Mm-hmm.
and we sometimes don't see the grounding in those fundamental skills. With MT singers, a lot of times we glaze over the fundamentals, and that's all they ever get, but they don't
Mm-hmm.
deeply enough to have the skills they'll need to learn quickly and efficiently.
Right.
Yeah. I'm a huge fundamentals person. Um, one of the reasons why it's one of my favorite classes to teach. The really basic
Mm-hmm.
functional musicianship,
Mm-hmm.
and how we apply that to our craft.
Mm-hmm. And for me, literacy, you know, is a means to understanding, and it's not a question of, hey, I can write these scales and I can write these keys. Some kids, sorry, going to be controversial here, they might not need that if you're a musical theater singer, do you need to be able to write, every key signature, every, harmonic minor and melodic minor? No, you don't need to know that. Can you identify whether it's a major or minor, or what's the feeling or the mode? That can be helpful. Can you identify where section changes are? That can be helpful. Can you identify where there are similarities between what's going on here and what's going on there? Can you recognize individual parts as they are moving through time together and against each other? That can be important. I'm not necessarily strict on you have to know this kind of notation, because let's be honest, there's a lot of notation out there, especially in the 21st century, and have something that works for you, great.
I think that's huge. And like I said, spotting those changes. So when they go to work with a coach or an MD and they're being taught music, they can clearly see tempo changes and section indicators, and recognize patterns where a groove changes and where a feel changes.
Mm-hmm.
You know, they see a meter change, and they recognize that, oh, the feel is gonna change here.
Mm-hmm.
Whether I really understand how many eighth notes are in this measure, I have to understand how to feel it.
Yep.
Um, there's there are definitely musicianship skills that are not just the bare bones of, can you read this page?
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
That's huge, and I see that as a deficit as well. A flip side of that, I think, for classical singers, we and people who go through the more traditional conservatory model, um, knowing a little bit more about character and intention and the acting, and how to imbue what they're working on with
Mm-hmm.
emotive qualities that are inherent in a text,
Mm-hmm.
for singers, or are inherent in the musicality of a piece for, maybe even orchestral players.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes we leave that emotional quality aside in lieu of technical training,
Mm-hmm.
uh, and that's kind of robbing the music of something as well.
Absolutely. Absolutely, it is. We're so focused on you've got to make this particular sound better that we lose the fact that you're actually trying to say something.
Yes, great. I like that. Um, so this has been really fascinating, and we've covered a lot of our questions. I'm looking down our list here, John, and we talked a little bit about the adjunct professor gig lifestyle here. Um, what about career highlights and aspirations?
Oh
That's a
gosh.
good one.
Oh man.
What do you have? What have you had going on, or what do you have coming up that are really exciting for you?
Okay, so COVID kind of gets in the way of things. So that coming up question, there's nothing on the horizon right now. I shouldn't necessarily say that. I'm currently involved in the Dueling Divas online battle with Fresco Opera Theater. That's kind of fun. There are some plans that are in the works. I'm looking at doing a Vintariza, collaborating with my theater and digital media faculty at LCC. Can we put together a digital rendition of that with an actor acting out what's going on while I'm singing in the background? That's very much in the early works. Whether that actually pans out or not is another question. So those are the things that are kind of on the horizon. Career highlights. Oh man, I've had so many wonderful opportunities to sing with great people and to sing in fantastic spaces. I don't think that I could pick out just one. I can say that I really loved the early music stuff. I really love singing Bach. I really love doing chamber music. So I don't want to hit one highlight there so much as just say I really enjoyed all those aspects. What about you?
So it's a great question. With aspirations, absolutely, I have some things, on the horizon that's sort of been postponed. The productions at the college got waylaid this year. We were delayed. I've done some really nice shows in the past few years with our music and theater departments, and our production of Shrek would have just been finishing up, but COVID derailed us.
Mm-hmm.
We are still in postponement mode. I'm hoping it stays that way, but who knows when, right?
Yeah.
Um, for me, I had a recital canceled. I was getting ready to do a recital of musical theater with a colleague soprano of mine here, in South Jersey, and that was derailed. But we'll regroup when we're allowed to resume activities.
Right.
Um, other things coming up. I had some early music gigs canceled with Vox Amadeus in Philadelphia, um, but not to dwell. Those things will come back in time. Uh, Other things that are huge on the horizon for me right now, the Actors Voice Studio. One of the ways that this series got its original name was that I was re-establishing my private studio here in Jersey, to work specifically with actors, singing actors. And so that's up and coming back. And this series is kind of an outcropping of that for me. So this is a current project that I'm really excited about. And I think we've already started talking to some great people.
We really have. No, it's a fantastic idea, and it's filling such a great niche in getting that early career advice, that end of college into, okay, and how do I actually do this now? Uh,
I think so. One of the things that I saw when I listened to theater podcasts and music podcasts and similar series was that you'd see a lot of emphasis on the stars on the stage, the people who are maybe doing some of these roles. You'd see the Instagram feeds, and it's this or that actor, but nobody was talking to that actor's coach or that actor's teacher or the director behind the production. No one was talking to the MDs that are all over Broadway or the pit musicians or anyone else who works with these singer actors daily. And I wanted to fill that kind of void, and give that perspective to young singers. So this project right now is a bit of a highlight for me at the moment, and I like it that way. I'm also teaching and singing wherever whenever I can and whenever I do. But I would say that this series right now for me is my main focus.
it's pretty cool.
Gosh, yeah. Current projects, collaborations, side by side. I think we might be down to our final question
I
here.
think we might be.
So, what advice would you give to a young singer actor as they get started?
Just sing. Uh, no, it's too easy to get distracted, and it is too easy to let your fear get in the way. So I would implore anybody who's starting off, just sing, and sing with all of your heart and all of your soul every time you do it. There is no way to do it halfway. And if you're not going to toss yourself into it fully, just stop and figure out why. Is it because you're afraid of success? Is it because you're afraid of failure? Is it because you feel like you lack something? Is there something you need to work out psychologically? I mean, there are any number of issues why we stop ourselves from investing fully. Um, just sing, throw yourself into it, and you'd be amazed at what'll happen.
It's great advice. For me, I would echo some of those sentiments and say, immerse yourself fully, and to do that means to really consume as much of the media of what you want to do as you possibly can. That means listening to cast recordings, listening to other singers, listening to programs like this where teachers and coaches and directors talk about theater and about music and about what we do. Talk to people. Talk to people who are doing it. Talk to other people who want to do it. Talk to them about why you want to do it, because that's going to take you a long way towards getting past that fear, getting past that sense of delay. Why whatever it is that's keeping you maybe from investing fully. You have a network of people. Start cultivating that network now.
Mm-hmm.
Your friends, your colleagues, even your teachers become your peers and become your network. Um, and immerse yourself in the world of music, of theater. If you're a singer, sing. I think John's advice is that's what it is. You have to sing every day. You have to talk to people who know about it. You have to study with as many people as you can. You have to coach with as many people as you can. Um, you have to say yes. Get out and do experiences, even if they scare you. Um, and you have to expand upon what you already think you know and continue to grow.
Love it. Love it.
Yeah, I think that's it for today. This was really fabulous. Hopefully, you got to know us a little bit, and it'll give you a baseline for the rest of the series, where we're really talking to some amazing people. John and I have already started talking to a lot of industry professionals. We have some fabulous interviews coming up, but this one will be our first, and then we'll go from there. And I look forward to it greatly.
Me too, man. Me too.
All right, awesome.